Okie dokie, Vitaly. Good luck. Your first command.
This huge cargo ship left Venezuela with no cargo whatsoever.
Which I suppose should have started alarm bells ringing.
As the seas got choppier and choppier and the winds got higher, they ran aground after about 3 days at sea.
So almost before the operation began, it was already in choppy waters.
The captain of the MV Matthew, Sohail Jalva, said that he would rather go to jail than to stay in the storm. And he said that he was leaving, he was getting out of there.
Irish naval ship, the WB Yates, gets in contact with the ship and says, we would like to board the ship.
It started heading further out into international waters.
I have fired a warning shot. Do you understand? Over.
Irish warship, please don't fire at us.
What they didn't count on was that the Irish Army Rangers were also on their way, and that was going to be the next step.
The crew is panicking.
If the chopper's coming, put the lifeboat on fire and it. Otherwise, good luck.
Ireland is not a soft target for transnational organised crime networks.
This investigation dismantled the significant international criminal group. It kept 157 million euros worth of cocaine off our streets and out of the pockets of organised crime.
It is obviously a loss and a blow, but I think they would see it as an occupational hazard.
So the MV Matthew was a huge cargo ship. It was registered in the Marshall Islands and registered to a company called Symphony Marine, who were based in Dubai. But really, it's believed it was controlled by a Dubai-based international organised crime group. And it was down in Venezuela back in August in 2023, and it was sailing under the Panamanian flag, but that's really just a flag of convenience. So there were lots of different layers to the MV Matthew's ownership. So I suppose that initially started the alarm bells ringing.
Dubai kind of seems to be the anchor for the whole operation. You know, there were meetings held in Dubai with some of the crew, and the ship was owned by a shell company located in Dubai.
It's understood that there were Dubai-based criminal organisations involved in this, and of course the biggest one that comes to mind is the Kinahan Organised Crime Group, and the guards have said that it is reasonable to assume that the Kinahans did play a part in this. But I suppose what's interesting is that even with the Kinahans' reach and how much resources they have behind them, they weren't able to do this solely on their own.
There's a really convoluted story behind what was happening with the MV Matthew at that time. So obviously there was a Dubai-based ownership, and there was a criminal organisation in Dubai that was orchestrating this trip across the Atlantic. But intermixed with that, there appears to have been some international terrorist organisations. Hezbollah has been named as one of the organisations involved. Other criminal organisations operating in Europe seem to have been involved in this. So there seems to have been an element of both trying to make money from the sale of cocaine, but also of trying to destabilise Western democracies through financing criminality in those democracies, and through the destabilising effect of cocaine and the social effects that it has. And that seems to have been at least part of the motive for this shipment.
What the court case outlined was how vast the operation was. There was a WhatsApp group directing the deck crew, and the people in that WhatsApp group were located in countries such as Iran, the city of Dubai, the Netherlands, Turkey. So it was a wide-ranging cross-country drug smuggling operation. And the court case only pulled out a couple of threads in the whole entire web.
There was 21 people on board. There was 15 ordinary seamen, and then there were 6 officers or people in charge. There was a deck officers WhatsApp group created, and this included a number of the different officers that were on board, but interestingly not the captain. The captain wasn't involved in it. There was another man in the WhatsApp group who wasn't on board.
This person in Dubai who seems to have really been running the show and also had some marine experience himself, or some seafaring experience himself, and he was referred to as Mehdi Boardbar by the prosecution in this case, but in the group WhatsApp he was called Captain Noah.
When the MV Matthew set sail off the coast of Venezuela, it was off an island called Curacao. It actually didn't have anything on board at that stage, which I suppose should have started alarm bells ringing for any of the crew members who were aware of what was or what wasn't in the cargo hold.
This huge cargo ship left Venezuela with no cargo whatsoever. Its supposed destination was Gdansk in Poland. People on board would have noticed straight away that there was nothing on board this ship, even though it was capable of carrying many, many tons of bulk materials such as grain.
It is believed on the 5th of September is when cargo is loaded on the ship, when the crew were deliberately distracted.
There were a number of ordinary seamen on board, as well as those that were actually convicted. And the ordinary seamen, they didn't really have any idea what was going on. And we heard in court that they were plied with alcohol. There was a barbecue, a party. And then when they were more or less incapacitated in the middle of the night, the drugs were brought on board.
At sea, the MV Matthew met up with another ship, and the people on board, when they spoke to Gardaí later, they described that the men on this other ship were armed, they were carrying guns, and they used a crane to lower this really large 2.2 tons of material onto the MV Matthew. Now, they claimed at the time that they didn't know what it was, that they were told it was spare parts. Some of them said they didn't believe it was spare parts, and it probably would have been obvious to them that it wasn't, particularly as Harold Estoesta, a Filipino officer who was on board the MV Matthew, said, people don't carry guns when they're delivering spare parts.
An awful lot of intelligence came to Gardaí and Customs, some of it from international law enforcement authorities. So the Gardaí were aware that there was going to be a massive drug shipment coming through Irish waters. Now, it wasn't completely certain at that time that it was going to try and be landed on Irish soil, but they knew that there was going to be a large drug shipment coming through on an unknown bulk carrier. So at that stage, it didn't seem very clear that it was definitely going to be on the MV Matthew, but they were certainly on the lookout for that. They obviously monitor different criminals or people suspected of having criminal associations all the time, and there were 3 particular people of interest that they were monitoring around that time. So they were on the ground in Ireland, in the north, and here in the Republic of Ireland.
Independently of one another, the Gardaí and the Customs both got intelligence from their international partners that there was a major drug shipment coming into Ireland, and they were aware of the presence of 3 men who were likely to be involved in this. They've been referred to as persons of interest 1, 2 and 3.
Vitaly Lapa, who was the Ukrainian man who was to captain the Castlemore, he stayed with one of these people of interest, and then 2 of them travelled down together with Vitaly Lapa down to a Castletown Bear in County Cork, met another person of interest there, and they purchased the Castlemore.
Vitaly Lapa, he was an experienced seaman, a fisherman, but he wasn't happy with this boat. He didn't think it was fit for purpose. He didn't think the engine was good enough to bring them out into the Irish Sea to do the rendezvous with the MV Matthew that was planned. He didn't think it was powerful enough, and he didn't think the engine was in good enough condition. But he was overruled by person of interest 1, a Dubai-based criminal, it would appear, who told him this was the boat that they were going to use regardless. And 300,000 euros was wired from Dubai for the purchase of the Castlemore. Vitaly Lapa was overruled, and it was decided that was going to be the boat that was going to be used.
So almost before the operation began, it was already in choppy waters.
There were 2 men set to crew the Castlemore, Vitaly Lapa, who was the captain, and Jamie Harbourne, who was a British national. He was just an ordinary seaman, but he had really no experience sailing whatsoever.
The purpose of that fishing trawler was to go up to the MV Matthew. The drugs would be loaded onto that smaller fishing trawler, and they would be transported to the Irish shores that way. And that was kind of the aim of the operation. They were to meet 3 times over a couple of days in late September, but various conditions conspired against them that meant they didn't manage to meet even once.
Well, it seems to have been a bit of a disaster from the start, because Jamie Harbourne and Vitaly Lapa, first of all, they didn't have a common language, so the only way that they could communicate was through gestures and through Google Translate. They had Wi-Fi and specialist equipment installed on board so that they could communicate with the persons of interest back on the mainland in Ireland, and so that they could communicate with Dubai. But that Wi-Fi kept kicking in and out. It kept stalling on them. They were forced to use ordinary radio at times. And of course, then the seas were getting extremely choppy. Jamie Harburn was not a seafarer at all. He had no experience. And from the moment he got on board that ship, he was sick. And he remained sick for the next few days while they tried again and again and again to meet up with the MV Matthew, and failed each time, either because they couldn't get up to the right speeds on board the Castlemore, they couldn't communicate well enough with the MV Matthew to actually know exactly where it was for the rendezvous points, and so they missed each rendezvous. And as the seas got choppier and choppier and the winds got higher, they ran aground after about 3 days at sea.
When the ship ran aground, they really had no choice but to radio for help. They were sitting ducks, really. They had already more or less come to the attention of the Coast Guard, and they really had no choice. Jamie Harburn was really, really scared, and we heard evidence of that, and that he was actually very, very grateful when he was rescued. So they had to radio for assistance. The Coast Guard came out, airlifted them, and then they were subsequently arrested when they were brought ashore.
Eventually, all those difficulties with the Castlemore culminated in them running up on a sandbank in County Wexford. They issued a distress call and they were picked up by Irish authorities. That changed the plan on board the MV Matthew, and the crew said instead they would put all the 2.2 tons of cocaine that had been loaded onto the deck of the ship, that they would put that into a lifeboat, scrub the lifeboat so there's no unique identifiers or markers on it, and they would use that to transport the drugs to shore instead. So even though a huge aspect of their plan, that the Castlemore had run aground and 2 of the men had been picked up by Irish authorities, that did not put them off still wanting to send the drugs to shore. Captain O was saying, everything is fine, we're going to go with the lifeboat plan. He was trying to put the crew at ease, I suppose, that the bit of an upset would not completely throw things off course.
LB, lifeboat, proceed. Proceed with lifeboat.
On board the MV Matthew, Jelva, the captain of the ship, was getting increasingly frustrated. He never wanted to make the drop in Irish waters. He wanted to do it in the Mediterranean, and he told them that. He said, it's always low pressure here in the Irish Sea. The waters are too choppy, the wind's too high. We're never going to be able to make the rendezvous, and even if we do, we're not going to be able to move the drugs from this boat onto a much smaller boat, which the Castlemore was.
And he actually said to those on land, that were controlling the operation at one stage, that he would rather go to jail than to stay in the storm. And he said that he was leaving, he was getting out of there. So he actually radioed the Coast Guard to be medically evacuated from the ship. Now, he actually didn't need a medical evacuation, it was later learned, but he asked to be medically evacuated from the ship.
And he's arrested at that hospital later on, but they seize phones and cash, and those phones will be crucial in the investigation. Even though the captain has been airlifted off the ship, again, Captain Noah and the crew are not put off, and they say to a Ukrainian man, you are now the person in charge of the ship. I can't officially make you a captain, but you are the guy in charge of receiving orders from us now.
Okie dokie, Vitaly. Good luck, your first command. Unfortunately, the flag is Panama. I cannot make you real captain. But anyhow, we will go ahead. We will go ahead for now.
The L.E. William Butler Yeats, which is an Irish naval vessel, was being used at this stage by the Irish Customs Service, and they were watching the MV Matthew the entire time. They knew it was a suspicious vessel. They were aware of where it had come from. They were also aware that it had been spoofing. In other words, it had been misrepresenting its location at sea.
So the suspicious activity of the MV Matthew attracts even greater attention, I suppose is the best way to put it, from the Irish authorities, who were already monitoring it, but the ship has changed course. It's moved up the Irish east coast. Now it's back down towards Waterford, and it's anchoring there under the pretense of engine troubles, plans to stay there for a day or two, which was a ruse to buy them some time. Irish naval ship, the W.B. Yeats, gets in contact with the ship and says, we would like to board the ship. We would like custom officials to inspect the ship, and how long before you can arrange for that to happen. The MV Matthew asks the group chat what it should do, and eventually they get in contact with the W.B. Yeats, giving the impression that it will comply.
After the MV Matthew heaved its anchor, it started heading further out into international waters. Now, that's despite the fact that the LEWB Yates was in radio contact with the MV Matthew at this stage and telling it to go towards the port of Cork.
They knew that they were now being pursued by a Navy vessel. They had to understand that this Navy vessel didn't believe the story that they were telling them. They were trying to make it look as though they were complying with what they were being told to do, which was to head towards port down in the south of Ireland. But instead, they were actually travelling along what is called the contiguous zone, which would, if they kept going, take them out of Irish territorial waters. And they believed if they could get out of Irish territorial waters, they'd be entirely free and safe, because they believed that the Irish Navy wouldn't be able to or allowed to follow them.
The LEWB Yates gave another instruction again to head towards the port of Cork, and when the MV Matthew didn't, the LEWB Yates declared itself a warship, and it took off in hot pursuit, as it's called, of the MV Matthew.
So the plan came from Dubai, again telling them, these guys can't board your ship. They're not authorised to do that. There's law that prevents them from doing it. This was the legal advice they were getting. It seems that that legal advice probably came from an online chatbot.
Increase your distance from the land. You will get the proper instruction for further steps. And God bless. As you can see, the method of boarding in case of not being in territorial waters is different. So don't get panic.
This is a really tense situation where there is a huge bulk carrier heading out towards the high seas. There are Irish authorities, customs and naval officers chasing them and trying to get them to stop.
The LEWB Yates fired a number of warning shots towards the MV Matthew. Harold Estoesta asked the LEWB Yates, was it in hot pursuit? The LEWB Yates confirmed it was indeed in hot pursuit and gave its order again to turn around and go towards the port of Cork.
You are obstructing a customs officer in conducting their duty, which carries a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison on an indictment conviction. We are requesting that you alter your course to starboard to a safe course and more direct route to Cork immediately. Over. I have fired a warning shot. Do you understand? Over.
Irish warship, please don't fire at us. We are not in contagious zone, nor your local jurisdiction. Can you advise if you are in hot pursuit of us? Because we are commercial vessels, please do not endanger our safety.
Our convention and the law of the sea applies. We are in hot pursuit. You will not comply with my orders. I will now issue a further warning shot.
There's a lot of different plans they go through, because they've obviously given up really at this point on meeting another boat out or another vessel out in the Irish Sea. They were telling them to make their way to Sierra Leone in West Africa and to get the drugs out of there, get them out of Irish waters, get as far away from the William Butler Yates as you can. What they didn't count on was that the Irish Army Rangers were also on their way, and that was going to be the next step.
The crew is panicking.
Till now, there is no helicopter for you guys, no commando, nothing. Okay? Be confident. There is a law preventing them to board the ship. My stress level is near to heart attack. Try to be calm. Be calm. Give your final command and demand to the warship and the custom with confidence. Switch off VHF, full speed go.
All this time, Harold Estoesta was in contact with both the Navy and with Captain Noah back in Dubai, explaining what was going on. And he could see the helicopter incoming with the Army Rangers.
When the crew get sight of the Air Corps helicopter hovering overhead and, elite Irish soldiers ready to fast rope down onto the ship, that is the moment where the group chat participants are like, we are out, this is us done.
If the chopper's coming, put the lifeboat on fire and it. Otherwise, good luck.
The ship then starts to take evasive action. It starts to maneuver very dangerously, quite vigorously in the ocean for such a big bulk carrier. What they planned to do was fast rope or rappel down to the deck from the helicopters. It was extremely chaotic. The ropes didn't even touch the deck. The Army Rangers, they had to fast rope down from the helicopters, and when they did manage to get onto the deck, they noticed that there was something on fire in one of the lifeboats. Now, when they looked into the lifeboat, discovered it was the drugs, they were able to extinguish that fire and they were able to save that evidence, which was crucial to this investigation.
They find 2.2 tons of cocaine worth an estimated 157 million euro, and it makes it the largest drug seizure in the history of the state.
8 males were sentenced yesterday by the Special Criminal Court for the international trafficking of cocaine. The sentences imposed by the Special Criminal Court provide a clear message to persons involved in international drug trafficking that Ireland is not a soft target for transnational organised crime networks.
This investigation dismantled a significant international criminal group. It kept 157 million euros worth of cocaine off our streets and out of the pockets of organised crime.
There were 6 people on board the MV Matthew who ended up pleading guilty to an offence in relation to this attempted smuggling of cocaine. Kamali Osgun was the only one of these 6 who wasn't a very, very experienced seafarer, so the others all had a lot of experience in it. These were people drawn from all different parts of the world. Now, Kamali Osgun, as I said, is the one person who didn't have any seafaring experience, and it appears that his role on board the MV Matthew was to keep an eye on the other officers to make sure that everything was going as it should be and to report back to his superiors in Dubai. The first 2 to plead guilty were the 2 who had been on board the Castlemore, Vitaly Lapa and Jamie Harbron. There were 4 others who took a challenge to their trial, attempted to have the charges dropped. That was unsuccessful. They pleaded guilty after that. 2 more of the accused took trial dates, but after 3 days of their trial, they pleaded guilty. And it was said by the judge that the likely reason that they pleaded guilty was because of the clarity of the evidence against them, and it was so overwhelming.
Osgun received the largest sentence of 20 years, and then they were staggered down between the different crew members to 13.5 years was the shortest sentence received. Cumulatively, altogether, they amount to 129 years in prison.
Very large sentences have been handed out to each of these men. If more senior people within that organisation are caught and are brought to justice, they will be facing even lengthier sentences. That seems inevitable.
Well, the seizure of the MV Matthew and the drugs on board is hugely significant for Ireland in tackling organised crime. Obviously, we know the Kinahans and other different organised crime groups operate out of Ireland. I suppose there has always been a concern about whether our waters are a little bit perhaps unprotected, but I suppose this has really shown that we can make these huge seizures.
That has to send a message and it has to be important, but it would be hard to imagine that it's something that's going to prevent further shipments passing through Irish waters.
It's definitely a boost for Irish authorities, I would say, but will it deter them? No, they are constantly adapting and changing and modifying their operations and behaviours to the environment that they're in, and if they're not, that's when they get caught. It is obviously a loss and a blow, but I think they would see it as an occupational hazard.